Sometimes in math, you might be asked to compare or answer a question like which something had the greatest change. So our example from class was we had tank A had an increase of 4 fish and tank B had a decrease of 5 fish. So which tank had the greatest change? Now, the key word here is change, not which one ended with the greatest amount or which one started with the greatest amount. But in this scenario, the values changed, and so which one had the most change? And this is a real-life application of absolute value. And simply put, absolute value, oh my gosh. All right, let me try it. Absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line. So if we're looking here, we know a decrease of 5 is really the same thing as like a negative 5, and an increase of 4 is like a positive 4. So on our number line, if we stick our 0 in the middle, and I have an interval of 1, I can label this out. I added a little bit of extra space there, that's fine. Here's negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6. So we have our 2 points. I'm going to do them in purple just so we can see. We have our negative 5 and we have our 4. And so if we were trying to figure out the absolute value, we are going to be looking at how far away from 0. Oh my gosh, that's much too large. How far away from 0 are these two numbers? So here's our 0 point. And so we know from looking at this that we have 4 units to the right of 0 is where we'd find 4. And then 5 units to the left is where we would find negative 5. So what's key here is that in our negative 5, this negative sign just tells us the direction that we need to travel, left or right of 0. And then the 5 tells us how far. And so we know that even though this is a negative 5, you still have to travel 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, 5 units. So that means that the absolute value that we write like this between these are 2 tall lines. They're not 1s or 11s or anything. This here is the absolute value of 5 is 5. So you would read that as the absolute value of negative 5 is 5 because it is 5 units from 0. So keep in mind these here, this just means absolute value right there. And it's important to note that because absolute value is the distance from 0, distance is always positive. You can't travel a negative amount of, like a negative number of meters. That would just tell you like you've gone 5 meters down if you're talking about elevation, like below sea level or something like that. But you're still traveling a distance, you're still covering ground, so that distance is always positive. So we know the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. The absolute value of 4 is 4. And so absolute value is always positive. And it's different. One thing that sometimes trips up students is they think, well, because the absolute value of negative 5 is a positive number, that must mean that absolute value is the same as the opposite. And that is not true. Absolute value is different than opposite. So if we look here, absolute value of positive 4 is still positive 4 because we're just talking about the distance. We're not looking at the opposite. We just want to know the distance. So the absolute value of a negative number is positive, and the absolute value of a positive number, I'm just going to duplicate this. absolute value of a positive number is also positive. So that is all that the absolute value is. So if you go back to a question like tank A, tank B, which had the greatest change, because we know the absolute value of 4 is 4, absolute value of -5 is 5, that means tank B had the greatest change. Granted, they lost a number of fish, but they lost more fish than tank A gained. So that is absolute value.